In this video I will go over some of the games I've been playing the past couple of weeks and days, and why I think you should give them a chance as well. Marie is a remake of the first game released in 1997. Not a reimagining, but an actual remake, as you also see in the title, in a new coat of paint. The same mechanics first introduced in the original are present here as well, with some quality of life improvements such as speeding up the pace during combat. It may sound bare bones, and I would understand if you said you were disappointed. But me personally, I thought it was interesting to experience the humble beginnings in this franchise. Atelier, or Atelier, however you like to pronounce it, has been evolving these past few years, and now with Rise of 3 being the best-selling game in the series, it's no longer as niche as it used to be. One of the many reasons I was excited for this remake was the reintroduction of a time limit, something that vanished into obscurity with the release of Atelier Shally, the first game in the franchise to abandon the system altogether. Actions such as gathering and fighting takes a day, traveling between locations takes several days, and synthesizing, aka Atelier staple, which serves as this game's crafting mechanic to those of you who are unfamiliar, varies according to the complexity of the item you are synthesizing. It may sound stressful at first, but in reality it's a very lenient system, since you have more than enough time to not only finish all of your main tasks, but also enough time to experience most of the game's side content. In fact, on my first playthrough I received the best ending, maxed out my reputation and knowledge, and did most of the character stories. Some of them, however, are easily missable if you don't know what you're supposed to do. By the way, if you're curious to hear how this game fares in comparison to the original, well, depending on who you are, you may be either disappointed or happy to hear that it's basically the same game. Visuals aside, of course. You can't pick the unlimited time mode, obviously, since it wasn't present in the original. Oh, and please keep in mind that the original is, of course, locked behind a paywall. You have to buy the deluxe edition to have access to the original. That stinks, but I'm glad we have at least the option to play the original, which was initially Japan exclusive until now. Overall, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a very likable 6 out of 10 game, nothing breathtaking, but very enjoyable nonetheless, especially if you like the franchise. I've been waiting a long time for this game. Purepedia is an immersive sim akin to classics such as System Shock 2 and my personal beloved all-time favorite Deus Ex. You're playing as Mary, not to be confused with my homegirl Mari. She's an agent equipped with cybernetic enhancements similar to JC. This game is still in development, so don't expect to play more than 2 levels at the moment. I can see a lot of potential. Something that stands out among other immersive sims is the climbing mechanic. Despite looking somewhat janky and feeling kind of floaty, it adds so much verticality and makes exploration feel so much more meaningful, since you aren't restricted to ground levels. It's really neat, check it out. Listen, I never said I'd be focusing exclusively on new games. If I have the opportunity to gush over my favorite game of all time, especially after the Purepedia segment, then I will do so. This is the single greatest game I've ever played in my life, a grand example of the immersive sim genre. A game so rich with creative decision making and an equally compelling plot. The immersive sim genre has seen some sort of a resurgence with games such as Cruelty Squad and the recent System Shock remake, with many more coming out sooner or later like Fallen Aces and Fortune's Run, and of course Purepedia. The very first mission is a perfect example of what the immersive sim genre is all about. You are tasked with apprehending the terrorist leader of the NSF, aka the National Secessionist Forces, who have occupied the Statue of Liberty. Your first decision happens in literally the first minute into the game. Your brother Paul approaches you and gives you the choice between 3 weapons. You can pick the sniper rifle, which sounds pretty handy if you take the sheer size of the island into consideration, the crossbow, which is silent and with the tranquilizer darts you have the option to dispatch enemies from afar without the guilt of murdering them, and lastly the gap gun, which is single-handedly the greatest tool in the entire game and your new best friend. Once you pick your weapon of choice, you make your way out of the docks and see the open area. So where do you go now? You search the area and find a single security bot guarding the entrance to the statue. This is where the gap gun comes in handy. The gap gun, short for guided explosive projectile, is a rocket launcher that has many uses. Now, if you have played this game before, you know that the gap gun is the only valid choice, simply because you can find a sniper rifle and a crossbow in the same level. The Gap Gun, on the other hand, is one of the rarest weapons in the entire game. The next time you have the chance to obtain this weapon is when you arrive in Hong Kong, which is where the second act of the game begins, so around 5 to 7 hours into the game, making it truly valuable. Now, if you recall me calling it a tool earlier as opposed to a gun, there is a reason for it. You will come across various doors and chests that are locked. You can open them with a lockpick, or you can instead use the Gap Gun, which will do the trick. Of course, it not only makes a lot of noise, but the ammo is rare as well, which adds another layer of moment-to-moment decision making. Should I use one of my limited lockpicks to quietly open that door, or do I use one of my precious rockets instead? The first area of the game is perfect to demonstrate the freedom to approach obstacles in any way you want. For instance, look at this. There's a sunken freighter with a locked hatch. You could just use one of your rare lockpicks, or you could use one of the TNT crates you can find in the same area. Throw it into the ocean, get some distance, shoot a crate and open it that way. Here's another one. You see the laser tripwire? You have various options now. You could use one of your hacking devices, a so-called multi-tool, throw an EMP grenade, which is not advisable since it makes noise and the grenades are also pretty rare. Or you could just find another route. We can crawl through the ventilation shaft and spot 2 additional obstacles. One is a door that you can open with a lockpick, and another one which you can't normally reach. So what do we do now? Go back? How about I just grab the trash can I saw before and use it to gain more height? Of course, that's pretty cool, but there's another option, one that I have only found out about like 3 years ago. The perceptive among you may have noticed I picked up a pepper spray before. That's because it serves another purpose. Besides temporarily blinding enemies, you can also counteract laser tripwires with a spray cloud, something I would have never figured out on my own. Apparently it doesn't work on every single laser tripwire, but I couldn't be bothered to test it out since I was a bit busy recording all that footage. So as you can see, it's not a game that limits your options to lethal or non-lethal like in other games such as Splinter Cell. This is not me throwing shade, by the way. I love Splinter Cell, and Chaos Theory is one of the best stealth games ever made with its own strengths, but in Deus Ex there are so many creative ways to tackle an objective, various optional routes you can take, and creative decision making. This is not a review in case you didn't notice, I'm just telling you to play this goddamn masterpiece, especially if you like sandboxy RPGs. Also, if you want a more in-depth analysis from someone who isn't a lazy piece of shit, go watch H-Bomber-Guy's video on Human Revolution, where he compares both games and goes into great detail. It's a 3-hour long video, but every second is worth it. Play Ghost Trick. I'm sorry to be a disappointment, but my first Turok game was Evolution, an infamously mediocre game. Unlike Turok 2, which is super fun, you shoot aliens and silly hit-scan zombies and rescue disgusting looking children and other stuff I don't know about. Play this game, I like it, and if I like something, you know damn well it can be bad. Milk Outside the Bag of Milk Outside the Bag of Milk is a horror visual novel about a young girl struggling with anxiety, psychosis and trauma. First things first, the art style is so fucking good and immediately piqued my curiosity. The reddish color palette is surprisingly effective in conveying the girl's decaying mental state. It's almost as if Lane took LSD and got transported into Silent Hill. Minus the monsters. Its themes are something I've seen done in other games before, so if you're one of those people rolling their eyes at the idea of playing another indie game about depression or mental illness in general, I can assure you it's not as on the nose, at least in my opinion. Also, it's a very short experience that shouldn't take you more than 2 hours, unless you want to see all of the endings. There's also a prequel called Milk Inside the Bag of Milk Inside the Bag, which is not really mandatory but still recommended, especially since it's really cheap. So anyway, I enjoyed it a lot and I encourage you to play this yourself if you like visual novels with a thick horror aesthetic. Just keep in mind that the game deals with some heavy themes and uses the appropriate imagery to carry its themes in question. Shadow Gambit is one of my most anticipated games of this year. Developed by the same studio that gave us two of the greatest stealth RTS games in recent memory, Shadow Tactics and Desperados 3. Shadow Gambit follows in the same footsteps and promises to be another GOTY candidate for everyone who enjoys these types of games. Sadly, I didn't capture any footage cause I'm a lazy piece of shit, hence the trailer footage, but I can already tell that the team is about to give us another hood classic. Seriously, do yourselves a favor and get Shadow Tactics. It's occasionally on sale and super cheap, so give it a chance, especially if you like either stealth or real-time tactics. Fallen Aces. Lastly, there's one more game I want to share with you. Fallen Aces. The game I've mentioned before, you guessed it, is another immersive sim. The demo currently available shouldn't take you any longer than 30 minutes to finish, but it already looks very promising. The moment I saw the 50s comic art style, I knew I had to wishlist it. So what exactly is this game? Well, in a traditional immersive sim fashion, you have linear level design with non-linear gameplay. It's up to you if you want to use combat or stealth, but you will most likely be fighting a lot. Its rudimentary stealth mechanics are nothing to write home about anyway, since you're limited to just sticking to the shadows, and you can't experiment much beyond just throwing a bottle to distract enemies and other stuff you've seen in many other stealth games before. But what does stick out, one of the main differences between this game and other immersive sims, is the focus on melee combat. Similar to something like, let's say, Condemned 1 and 2, you are fighting off foes using your fists or nearby objects such as glass bottles or pipes. So far, the combat is enjoyable if a little too basic and easy. Limited to just punching, blocking and charging, you'll get the hang of it in just a few minutes. I was playing the demo on the highest difficulty, and while you do take a lot more damage in comparison to the lower ones, it still feels more like a power fantasy than an actual challenge. For example, spamming the charge attack did most of the work for me. It's strong enough to send enemies flying, literally. Additionally, you can stun them as well, which I didn't find very useful though. Once you successfully knock out their teeth, instead of dying, they stay unconscious and can be revived if found by one of their friends. To avoid this, you can just kill them by stomping them out, which also leaves me questioning if potential non-lethal runs may be awarded, with an achievement or something maybe. You can also use various firearms, although I had only found 2 of them, if you know where to look, and it makes things even easier. Enemies aren't particularly smart either. Similar to Deus Ex, you can use ventilation shafts to traverse between areas and stay undetected. Unfortunately, it's way too easy to shake off your pursuers by simply hiding inside the nearest vent. I'm not holding it against the developers though. The game is still in development after all, and they've already addressed they've been working to improve the enemy AI since the demo has been out. So it's safe to assume the finished game might prove to be more of a challenge. I'll definitely check out the full game once it's out. Alright, that's pretty much it with the video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing so my irrelevant ass can grow at some point. I don't ever expect to make this full time, but it's still a fun pastime activity, so bye bye.